Our story starts on a beautiful afternoon. We are introduced to young Lelouch and Suzaku cheerfully playing outside. In that very moment, they helplessly witness Japan being invaded by Britannian military forces. A once proud nation has been stripped of all their rights and is now identified as a Britannian colony named Area 11. Young Lelouch then swore to Suzaku to one day take down Britannia and free Japan. Fast forwarding 7 years later, present Lelouch is seen here skipping school with his friend Rivals. He challenged a nobleman to a game of chess which he then won with ease. Upon exiting the building, they both noticed the news broadcast showing Prince Clovis III, Prince of Britannia, and ruler of Area 11 addressing the public pertaining to the terrorist attack which took place earlier on. While rushing back to school, they encountered a speeding truck behind them. It then lost control and swerved left off the highway and ended up crashing into a construction site. Lelouch then climbed aboard and tried to help. While doing so, he was greeted by a faint female voice. But before he could do anything, the truck drove off and he fell inside. Not long after, realizes that it's being chased by military forces. He then noticed a familiar girl who boards the Nightmare Glasgow and distracts the soldiers. The driver then escaped through an old underground railway in the Shingoku ghetto. Lelouch was then spotted trying to escape by a single soldier who actually turned out to be Suzaku. At that exact moment, the capsule opens and a woman emerged from it. They were then found by other soldiers and Suzaku was ordered to execute both Lelouch and the woman. But he refused and ended up getting shot instead. The truck driver, as a last resort, detonated a bomb. By some miraculous way, Lelouch and the woman somehow managed to escape, but was immediately discovered by some other soldiers. He was about to get shot, but the woman jumped in front of him saying he must not die and took the bullet instead. Before dying, she grabbed his arm and offered him power via a contract which he accepted without hesitation, which he then used and defeated all the soldiers in sight. Next, he used his powers to manipulate a military officer and took away her nightmare. On doing so, he radios the girl in the Glasgow and gave her a set of instructions that helped her defeat the military officer Jeremiah. He then radios the rebel leader Ogi and presented him a set of nightmares that were being transported in the train. Although reluctant at first, after seeing how effective his tactics are, they decided to work with him for the moment. Here we are introduced to the Lancelot, putting up a good fight and taking out most of the rebel forces. Lelouch managed to escape and made his way to Prince Clovis's location, and made him withdraw all his military units at gunpoint before revealing his identity. Here Clovis was astonished to see that it was actually Lelouch, his brother, whom he thought to had died many years back then as a child. Lelouch then uses his ability and demanded answers about his mother's death, but unfortunately, he was clueless onto what had taken place on that day, leaving him to be of no more use, and was then shot dead. The next day at school, we are now officially introduced to Callan. Lelouch realizes that she is the same girl who he saw the previous day. Later that day, he confronted her and used his ability to confirm if it was actually her. He attempted to use it again by telling her not to mention anything about Shingoku to anyone, but it had no effect. She then demanded answers about his knowledge of it, but luckily for him, Shirley called and reminded them about class, and he took off, leaving her suspicious of him. The next day, Lelouch is testing out his ability on a teacher. He now understands that his ability can only be used once on a person. Callan is now seen on the roof thinking about what Lelouch said to her, which raised her suspicions even higher. She monitored him throughout the day, which eventually he noticed. He then approached her desk and asked her to meet privately. While meeting in the student council hall, they were immediately interrupted by the student council members. Everyone started goofing around with a champagne bottle. It eventually popped open and poured all over Callan. While taking a shower, Lelouch brought her some change of clothes. She then asks him to hand her a pouch that she left on the sink, then confronted him about his knowledge about Shingoku. The phone rang, which Lelouch then insists on answering before someone else comes in. He handed her the phone, telling her it was for her. On the other end was the voice that instructed her during the Shingoku battle. She then released him and thought she got it all wrong, but it actually turned out to be a pre-recording that he made that with a set of instructions for a meeting between them. Back in the student council hall, a news broadcast is being showed accusing Suzaku of Prince Clovis's murder and is to be executed by Jeremiah's order. Upon following the orders given to her, she showed up with Ogi and 2 others. He then confronted them wearing a costume, hiding his true identity. He then puts forth a deal to show them his capability on the front line in return for their trust. During the transfer of Suzaku, which was being broadcasted, he publicly introduced himself as Zero and announced that he's the one who killed Clovis. He used his ability on Jeremiah and saved Suzaku. With doing so, he gained the trust of the rebels. He then tried to get Suzaku on his side, but he refused, stating that joining the rebels while still being suspected for Prince Clovis's death might jeopardize the trust between Britannians and honorary Britannians, and might also put other innocent Japanese lives in danger. He thanked Zero for his efforts before leaving out to turn himself in. On Lelouch's return home, we see Nunnally, Lelouch's little sister with C2, whom he thought to had died earlier. Lelouch immediately distracted Nunnally and took C2 away so he could question her in private. While outside, Lelouch and C2 observed how long his ability could last. We also learnt that the power he possesses is known as Geass. Upon the arrival of Princess Cornelia, she implemented a strategy to pull out Zero in an effort to kill him and avenge Clovis. She sent military units to raid the Saitama ghetto and conduct a large-scale massacre. Seeing this, Lelouch refused to sit back and just watch, then stormed into action. He confiscated a Sutherland and fought alongside rebels from the area. But unlike Clovis, Cornelia predicted this and played him right into her trap. Fortunately, C2 showed up disguised as Zero and distracted her. Lelouch then took this opportunity and escaped. Zero invited the rebels to his hideout to establish their union. On arriving, they saw the news that Britannians are being held hostage by a small group of the Japanese Liberation Front. These hostages also include members of the Student Council. Zero arrived on scene reasoning with Cornelia and assuring that he can save the hostages if he meets with the Japanese. A female hostage stood up demanding to see their leader and stating to be Euphemia, the third princess of the royal family. By the time she arrived, the leader and his subordinates were already killed by Zero's Geass. Zero then revealed that all the hostages are safe and introduced himself and his subordinates as the Black Knights. They quickly became notorious over time, and they went on and capitalized on their fame, being somewhat of a vigilante group. They attracted powerful allies who are willing to assist in their work. It didn't take much time before their manpower started to grow tremendously. Here we see Cornelia waging an all-out attack on the Japanese Liberation Front's headquarters. But the Black Knights have prepared for her attack, and Zero has the main JLR security under the influence of his Geass. They then surprise Cornelia with a landslide, took out an entire unit of nightmares. We then see Callan having the upper hand against Jeremiah using her new Gurren Mark II. Cornelia has now been completely surrounded by Zero, but just as things were about to get grim, the Lancelot showed up right in time. It and the Gurren head-to-head in battle. The Gurren then fell off the edge of a cliff with its right arm shattered. Zero then called for all his units to retreat from the battleground. Kiyoshiro Todo, leader of the Japanese Liberation Front, has been scheduled to be executed. But Zero then went on and broke him out of prison, knowing that his skills and leadership can be useful to the Black Knights. As per usual, the Lancelot shows up trying his best to stop, but this time his hatch was destroyed by Kiyoshiro, revealing Suzaku as the pilot to all the Black Knights. As the Britannian military were making their entry, the Black Knights then used a smoke screen and made their escape with Kiyoshiro. Zero then planned with the Black Knights to capture Suzaku and the Lancelot. They then made their move and invaded an island where the royal family were conducting research. Suzaku then jumped into action in an effort to protect Princess Euphemia. Unknowing to him, it was all a trap. Zero then approached him again, asking him to join the Black Knights. The Avalon, Prince Schnitzel's ship, then fires a blast to take out the Black Knights all at once. Zero is then seen located elsewhere on the island. He then spotted Euphemia and pulled his gun. She then addressed him by Lelouch and requested to see his face one more time before he fires, in which he did. He then reconciled and they searched for a way off the island. They stumbled on Suzaku and Callan. While in confrontation, his Geass activated a path that took them to an underground cave where Schnitzel was conducting research. After being attacked, Zero then took their nightmare and escaped with Callan. At the Kyushu block, Katsui Sawasashi, with help from the Chinese Federation, declared a resurrection of Japan. Zero then told the Black Knights that they will not be collaborating with Sawasashi, stating that he's not acting independently, and he is only a puppet for the Chinese Federation. He then stated that their new mission is to make Tokyo an independent nation. The Lancelot then showed up on the Kyushu block to stop them, but he was too outnumbered and the Lancelot started losing energy. Zero then showed up and they both collaborated and took down Sawasashi. At the Ashford Academy School Festival, Princess Euphemia is seen with Lelouch and Nunnally right before her disguise was blown away, and everyone noticed her. Suzaku then came in time and saved her. She then took the opportunity to announce a new special zone of Japan where Japanese and Britannians can live equally. She then pleads to Zero to help her with this operation. Zero then arrived at the event and requested to speak with her in private. During that time, his Geass accidentally went off, compelling her to kill all the Japanese. Euphemia is now rampaging in a nightmare before being discovered by the Gurren. Zero then showed up and dismantled it. He then confronted her, and with no way of reversing the effect, he decided to shoot her so she wouldn't have to live with the burden of being a murderer. She was taken to the Avalon by Suzaku, where she eventually died. Out of pure rage, Cornelia has now waged a full-scale war against the Black Knights. Zero then took over Ashford and used it as his command center. Here we see V2 explaining to Suzaku the powers of Zero's Geass. He then rushed to the battlefield in rage, destroying all enemy nightmares in his way until he was confronted by the Gurren. Here they battled before the right arm got severed. Zero is now discovered by Cornelia. Her nightmare was so agile he struggled to keep up with her movement. But before she could do any serious damage, Dalton, under the influence of the Geass surprise attack that severed Cornelia's energy source. Zero then approached Cornelia, showing her his face. He then used his Geass and questioned her about his mother's death, which unfortunately she had no knowledge how it had happened. C2 then informed him that Nunnally has bine kidnapped and brought to Kamine Island. With no hesitation, he went after her. Suzaku went after him by Cornelia's orders, and Callan also followed by Oga's order. Upon arriving, he was stopped by Suzaku, demanding to turn around, and then fired a shot at the mask and breaking it, revealing his face. Lelouch then pulled his weapon. They both took aim and fired at the same time. This is where this story ends for now. If you like my content, feel free to like the video and leave a comment. Make sure to subscribe so you won't have to miss any new uploads. Thank you for watching.